Craig Gabriel, welcome to 2020 Revision.
Mr. Ralph Tucker, nice to be with you.
Now, according to your Twitter handle, you are a multimedia megastar. To me, you're just the bloke who does the tennis reports on the radio, but we'll roll with it.
How far behind you are.
In any case, can you please take us through your 2020 and what has been an extraordinary year, to say the least?
I think 2020 was probably the worst year of my professional life. Not be able to get on a plane was like daggers through the heart. I hadn't flown internationally since February, and that was really only to another state of Australia called New Zealand for about 3 days, and that's been it as far as any sort of overseas type travel. And that was really getting to me, and to be able to not have huge events happening like Wimbledon was really depressing. But full marks to the US Open and the French Open and the national federations for being able to still stage those events, albeit behind closed doors. But it wasn't the easiest thing to get to. So it's been a really rough road.
I was going to say, are you getting withdrawal symptoms from not being in the Qantas Club and also sitting at the pointing end of the plane?
Yep, exactly right. I went to Alice Springs sometime in October when borders between the Northern Territory and New South Wales opened up, because that was really the only place I could fly to with any sort of bit of distance. And much of that was really just to be able to get on an airplane. And it was fantastic. It really was. I mean, it was wonderful to get on the Flying Kangaroo all over again, there and back. And it was also very interesting spending a few days in Alice Springs.
We'll get to the impact on the tennis world in a sec, but I guess like most people, you're putting your time to good use. I follow you on Instagram. The garden's looking fantastic. The cooking skills have gone next level.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It really is. And it does occupy a bit of time, but that's not really quite what I want to be doing. I want to be talking about tennis. I want to be traveling and being at the tournaments. And the last time I was supposed to be at a tournament live was Indian Wells in March. I was on my way to the airport and I got a message to say, "Are you on the plane?" I said, "No, heading there." And the response that came back was, "Don't get on, we've just canceled." And that was the trend of it. And depression really hit me. I think it was the 1st of April when Wimbledon made their announcement. And for a little while, I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to speak to anybody. And it was really a legitimately rough patch. And then I still covered the US Open. I still covered the French Open, but it wasn't the same not being there. And to do it virtually was difficult, because while I was still putting in the same number of hours, anything between 15 and 20-hour days, the difference was it was at the other part of the day. It was middle of the night, and that made it even more tiring and very difficult.
Take me through that, because obviously you are, as you mentioned, used to doing long hours, but you're used to being there at the event. So it would have been a different kind of tiredness. It would have been a different kind of schedule. It would have been just completely weird. I mean, it's not for you to do things from the events. I mean, you would see a lot of the coverage on TVs in media rooms and different things like that. But to be in your own house doing the same job, and take me through that. That must have been bizarre.
It was very, very bizarre. It's a good word for it. Extremely strange, and it took a little getting used to. I mean, I will say Nine Radio were fantastic with working out of the 2GB studios in Sydney. Everything, they did a great job setting things up for me to be able to cover the events middle of the night from it right in there. And but it was a different mindset that you had to create for yourself, to not being there, and then to be doing post-match media conferences on a virtual basis. It was very difficult, and make sure you press the button to say that your hand is raised to ask a question, and you forgot about that sometimes and tried to jump in, but you were muted. So
Oh,
it was different and difficult, and but also an eye opener in one sense. But I certainly don't want to be doing that again.
the phrase "you're on mute" has to be the quote of 2020. I feel like with all of
Or
these virtual meetings that we're all doing, we're conducting this via Zoom from my kitchen table, which has been, anything from the classroom to the office to all of that stuff. And I guess a lot of people adjusting to the technology. And while it has its advantages, as you mentioned, there's nothing quite like being in
there.
person at an event.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you hear the message coming down the line. It'll be generally an European accent. Craig, unmute, question. Yeah, look, I'll tell you what, just in early November, covering the ATP finals in London, because again, it was behind closed doors and they only were credentialing people that were based in London. So I was still covering it virtually from Sydney. So there was a press conference with Daniil Medvedev, who ended up winning the championship for the first time. So I recorded it, and I went back and I was editing and listening back to it, but I half dozed off listening back. Nothing against Daniil, but again, you're working like from 1 o'clock in the morning, it's now 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So I'm listening to this, and suddenly I heard Craig, and I've jumped. But it was the recording. It wasn't the live person. It was the live person saying to me, but it had been recorded. So I thought it was, I actually started laughing at myself. But that's what happens.
You've been doing this for God knows how long, 40 years.
Don't push it, fella.
Yeah. You still got your resplendent youthful looks, though. But
And the cost.
doing this, and I guess just the human connection of seeing the same faces at the tournament year on year. I mean, that it must just be like really odd to just not do that, given that's been your life for such a long time.
Yeah, look, it really has. And that's why it's been so difficult. Somebody might say, "Oh, look, you're still being able to cover the event, and you're doing it from home or from, you're not leaving Sydney. You don't have to travel half a world away." It's not the same. You know what, Ralph? This is like people criticizing those who are in quarantine. And people in quarantine say, "Oh, 2 weeks here in a hotel. This is ridiculous. And it's so difficult." People say, "Well, what are you complaining about? It's a five-star hotel." Well, maybe it is, but you try staying in one small room without windows opening, average food being delivered. You're not getting daily room service by any stretch of the imagination. You've got no fresh air. You are almost in a prison.
Yep.
And people don't understand that, who have not experienced that. They think, "Oh, you're in a five-star hotel. What are you complaining about?" Yeah, we may be in five-star hotels, or you should be used to it. We may be in five-star hotels right through the year. But the difference is you're out of that room most of the day. You're working outside, and you're there essentially for breakfast, to sleep. Maybe if you're lucky, you've got away from the event early, you can have dinner out. So it is a completely different situation.
Talk to me about Wimbledon. That, for many people who don't follow the tennis circuit all year, tune in for that 2 weeks from the All England Club. To have that removed completely from the schedule, it's completely weird.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was saying before. That's when depression actually hit me. Yeah, there were a couple of days where I was just sitting and, I'll be honest, crying, because I didn't know what was happening, where we were going to go, what was going to be the outcome, how long this was going to go for. I mean, I sort of accepted, frustratingly and disappointingly, the cancellation of Indian Wells and then Miami. Tell you, I was relating about going on the way to the airport for Indian Wells and turning around and coming back, and I thought, oh, I've got to unpack. And then, yeah, a family member said, look, you've got enough clothes at home, just use those and don't unpack because you're going to go to Miami. Then, which I did. I left the luggage in the hallway. It sounds like a scene from, Evita, Don't Cry for
Yeah.
Me, Argentina. But when Wimbledon was cancelled, it changed everything. That's what everybody, for us, we look forward to the Australian Open and Wimbledon specifically, among obviously the other ones we look forward to, the US, French, and all that. But for us, those are the pinnacles. So when that was cancelled, it was like you felt you were being hit by a steam train going at full pace. And it was a lot to take in. The depression set in. People were morose, and you didn't know how to handle it. You really didn't, because it's never happened before. I mean, the last time Wimbledon had been cancelled was what, I think 1945 or something, because of the war. But sort of pick yourself up, and you've got to move on, and you've got to look ahead, and you've got to keep your fingers crossed that time goes quickly and these events will start coming back online.
I joked about you being a multimedia megastar at the start of this thing, but as well as the stuff that you do on the radio, you do a whole lot of other things that are associated with tennis across the year. How did that impact you work-wise with the tournaments and not being able to get to them in many cases?
Well, a major impact. I mean, income went from X amount of dollars to zero, because there's nothing you can do. There's nothing happening. How do you work on anything if there is no action? You're not being able to get to speak to anybody, to be able to create anything. So, you try and be a little bit inventive and, try to come up with some ideas and stuff, but it certainly is not going to replace the dollars that you've lost. It's minuscule, and very often there is nothing, absolutely nothing there. Because what can you talk about if you can't speak to a player? You can't be at a tournament. You can't. Everything is the shop has been shut, just like a cafe or a hotel or whatever, or the theater. It's very, very tough to get around.
So when tournaments were coming back, that was obviously when you kind of were able to get like a little bit of working and get going again. That must have been a bit of a relief given the depressive period that you mentioned.
Well, to some degree, even when you say tournaments were starting to come online, they were all overseas, and I have contractual obligations for consulting with tournaments, but a lot of those tournaments were all cancelled. The whole PR side, there was nothing happening. Sure, I mean, the US Open or the French Open you can talk about, virtually, but it's still not the same, and it's still not even close to covering the amount financially that you've lost and the goodwill, because you're not there, you're not seeing the tournament directors or the players or the officials or whatever. To just say you've lost X amount of dollars, that's only one aspect of the whole thing.
Let's talk about Nick Kyrgios being the smartest man in the room in 2020. Things have really gone bizarro, isn't it? Like when you compare the whole Novak Djokovic saga that went on earlier this year, when he looks like the sensiblest guy, we must be in some kind of parallel universe.
But you know what? The thing is, that's not different to Nick from other times, from the behind the scenes Nick I'm talking about. With his stand on things and his stand on charities and using that also term again, goodwill towards others as far as disadvantaged or underprivileged. That hasn't changed with Nick. And Nick has always been one to call someone out. and that's what he's done. And because he's not playing, because there's been no negative stuff on a tennis court, people are now maybe seeing that other side of Kyrgios, that somebody like myself, who's seen him around since the age of 15, has always been fully aware of.
What did you
I
make
mean, when
of?
you look at when you look at that, Ash Barty, Ash hasn't played since February either. Yeah, but she's still ending the year world number one, which is fantastic. But she hasn't played a match since what, end of January, beginning of February.
Yeah, it's just been extraordinary. What did you make of Novak's action, and has he gone down a rung or two in the eyes of the public?
Oh, look, possibly he has, but I think the public has also got short memories. The all that's going to be forgotten very soon, if it hasn't already been forgotten. Um, Even with Novak, people, we close to the game and who are involved in the game day in and day out, week in and week out, see a lot of things that don't necessarily get spoken about because you just don't feel right in saying things. But I think a lot of people have seen a different side of Novak as well. The diehard Djokovic fans will come out and make every excuse under the sun and slam you if you have something negative to say about him. But you know, again, we see a lot of things that don't necessarily get covered, and better left thing leaves let sleeping dogs lie.
So as we look forward, there are some, I guess, some promising signs a little bit on the horizon in terms of what the Australian summer might look like. Borders are opening and so forth. The plans are sort of in place, but not completely for the Australian Open, but the lead up to play some tournaments in Victoria. What are you looking forward to most in that regard?
I'm just looking forward to seeing tennis players on a tennis court live. That's the biggest thing, and just to be able to be part of an event at the event, not virtually. Tennis Australia have worked their butts off to get things happening, along with the ATP, and there's so many events, the WTA as well, and we're still they're still ironing out so much, and it's not just the Australian season; it's at least the first quarter of 2021, with all those other events that have got to be played after the Australian Open. And bring on this damn vaccine and hurry up with it, so we can really get things going. But Tennis Australia, it's incredible the work they've been putting in and trying to get around and be able to develop and give Australian tennis fans and tennis fans as a whole, or sports fans as a whole, an event that they will remember, that's going to be played with every safety protocol that is necessary, but at the same time, give us the excitement that we've been missing so much.
How do you think that'll impact on your life moving forward? In the ideal world, we get things back to somewhere near normal. What do you think the regulations are going to be, and how's that going to impact on how you conduct yourself at tournaments in terms of how things are set up and so
Yeah.
forth?
Yeah, look, I think there's still going to be a lot of the virtual stuff for at least, I'd say, the first half of the year, and then we'll see. But hopefully by then the whole vaccine aspect will be well and truly underway, and things will start to open up with tournaments a lot more, and you're going to maybe have the free passage, or more free passage than what we've got at the moment, which is so limited. And then hopefully that will start creating stuff that we can work on, and welcome people a lot more with events. I mean, Wimbledon, as an example, started planning for 2021 in July, and even then was looking is considering the closed door scenario as well. Wimbledon got off pretty well, as much as they wanted to play and all that, but with the pandemic insurance that they had, and it covered them, so they didn't really lose a lot of money. It was desperate for the U.S. Open and the French Open to be played. Otherwise, they would have been losing hundreds of millions of dollars or euros. So, once we start to see things moving, then all these things, the jigsaw will start, falling into place.
And I guess what people don't realise is the amount of, I guess, financial impact it has on the local community.
Yeah.
If we look at Melbourne for the 2 weeks, that's massive for the local economy. Not to mention people that work on the tournament. So the umpires and the ball kids and the people that, the ushers and all of these people that, I guess it's part of their lives, but it's part of their income on a yearly basis. And then the same goes for every tournament around the world.
The economic impact is phenomenal. And the international economic impact, the dollars this sort of event brings into the state and the country is incredible, is phenomenal. I mean, one example for the Indian Wells, the economic impact, what it lost was about 300 million US dollars just in that one. And it's not even one of the four majors. That's in one area, that Palm Springs, that the valley over there. So what something like this could do to an Australian Open is just mind-boggling. But the word is that they're expecting to maybe have 50% attendance. The problem is going to be a lack of international visitors and guests, and the hotel rooms and things like that. So it's not just what people see on a tennis court. It's everything around it, and there's so much around it that is affected. It's not a case of these guys, okay, so they're making $10 million a year, or Novak Djokovic's on-court official earnings is $140 million, whatever it is. Yeah, it's all those other players, those other people, the ancillary staff, as you're saying, the lines people, the drivers, the catering, all that. The London finals, the ATP finals in London had no lines people. It was all electronic, in November. The chair umpire was there, and it was all these systems that were on the chair with him for replays and all that. But think of this. If there are no lines people, where are the future chair umpires going to come from? They all start that way. They start as lines people and officials, and they work their way up. So what happens to the future with the chair umpires? How do they get their experience and things like that? So there's so many angles and aspects that are affected. It's incredible.
Craig Gabriel, thanks very much for joining us on 2020 Revision.
Let's hope it's a lot happier and brighter in 2021. Thanks, Ralph.